Hi, and welcome back. Today on the Canadian Culture Wars Report, I have a few interesting stories for you. First off, we have woke education strikes again. Castles, galleons, queens, moms, dads all have been deemed traumatic oppressive structures by reading organization Strong Start. We have an update on the case of Richard Bilkstzo. He was a TDSB principal who took his own life, sadly, in 2023 due to sustained DEI anti-Black racism struggle sessions. FOIs were submitted over a year ago and they reveal some shocking information. We have a comprehensive sex ed educator proving once again that this field of education certainly cannot be trusted in BC and certainly can't be trusted by third party organizations at this point. And then we just finish off on a story about how an Alberta town rejects political flags. If you're new here, my name is Melanie Bennett. I convene every week to share Culture Wars stories from around Canada. So let's just dive straight into our first story. Just last week, Shannon mentioned the Ontario Human Rights Commission's Right to Read report, which I haven't read and not too aware of. But Jamie Sarkanak, a journalist at the National Post, just put out an article that mentions a program that uses this as an excuse for more DEI. So let's look into it. This article, titled Education Activists Need to Leave Kids Alone, which frankly they do, explains how a reading program called Strong Start has been given the DEI treatment. What could go wrong? Well, let's find out, shall we? The article says, some Ontario schools use a little program called Strong Start to help kids learn to read. For years, it's done so by using games. Its Three Bears alphabet board game centers around a mother bear, a father bear, and a child bear. It's treasure hunt game and takes place on a sandy beach where there are trading ships off the coast. And there's a race to the castle game and where children move along a board doing just that. In a 2024 update to the program, all of these games have been replaced for diversity, equity, and inclusion reasons. It's yet another area within Canadian education that has felt this sector-wide iconoclasm, widespread destruction of works and symbols newly deemed unacceptable by a handful of zealots. Instead of religious images being burned or trashed, as has historically been the case, it's Canadian heritage and tradition. Let's have a look. There's a video. She provided a video of this, so let's watch it to see what she's talking about.
This video will focus on the revisions undertaken through a review of the program from an equity, diversity, and inclusion perspective. In Part 2, we will outline the important revisions made to the 4 strands of the program to further align.
This video is 6 minutes. We're going to watch through it, and I'll intersperse with reading the article. So it's not too long. We should be able to do both.
With the science of reading and the recommendations of the Human Rights Commission Right to Read report, both of which have informed the revised Ontario language curriculum.
So they're using the Right to Read report, BC Human Rights. You might want to go read it. I haven't, to justify this new approach, this DEI approach, so kids could see themselves reflected in the curriculum. Anyway, let's carry on.
Let's take a look.
Oh, what's going on?
We believe that children and volunteers need to see themselves and their school community reflected in the learning experiences provided by our programs. To this end, we initiated a comprehensive evaluation across all strands of the Letter, Sounds, and Words program resources and learning materials from an equity, diversity, and inclusion lens. We recognize the need for an in-depth examination of the games and activities in relation to concepts of relevancy and diverse representation. Here's what we looked for: outdated images that are not relevant to young children today, areas where we could eliminate concepts related to colonialism and Eurocentricity, and opportunities to ensure the images we include in our program are diverse and inclusive.
Colonialism is only European colonialism. I don't expect they are very interested in talking about any other forms of colonialism or the historical context of the colonialism. So only Eurocentricity, because that's white supremacy. They're not saying it here, but that's the view. So white bad, European bad.
In order to make sure our process was objective and thorough, Strong Start developed a panel of independent reviewers to participate in this EDI project. As well as conducting the review with internal staff members, we sought input from a group of external participants with subject matter expertise in this area. We also involved those with lived experiences, those who are representative of diverse communities, as well as those with specialist knowledge, which would critically inform our revisions. The reviewers were able to examine all the games and activities in the Letter, Sounds, and Words program and were asked to respond to questions regarding the images and concepts. They were also encouraged to provide feedback on our proposed changes and suggestions for further enhancements.
So those reviewers, those critical reviewers, that's interesting. Independent panel, all these words, it sounds really great, but this is actually a misnomer. I guarantee, well, they subject matter experts. So they're going to be DEI consultants. Now, DEI consultants do not have a diversity of thought. They literally are DEI consultants because they're ideologically conforming to a specific, frankly, radical ideology, which is talking about critically reviewing. What this is part of the ideology. It's about critiquing existing things, existing norms, until you can make them conform to that EDI ideology, which is a postmodernist neo-Marxist worldview that's been adopted by a liberalism that is. I know we say illiberal all the time, but in some respects it is liberalism. It's like a positive liberalism, like you must do this. We've decided for these moral reasons you must do this. And a negative liberalism is the freedom from something. All of these things have a diverse meaning. And I think the interpretation of it, but this sort of postmodernist neo-Marxist view of the world, which is based in identity, which is being imposed and adopted by people who consider themselves to be liberal, this manipulation is that this is where the tension is. And so in this case, it's a freedom to have something, right? Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent here, but the point is the critical in what she's talking about is criticizing existing norms until you can make them fit into the new ideology.
As a result of this review and the recommendations made from the diverse perspectives represented, Strong Start was able to implement changes that are more inclusive, culturally sensitive, and relevant to those who engage with the materials in the Letter, Sounds, and Words program. For example, our Race to the Castle board game is now Race to the Playground. We also updated images that are no longer representative of the lives of the children in our program to those that more effectively reflect the diversity of the communities we serve. An image of a hat, for instance, appears in many of our activities. After revision, these activities now include a variety of different hat images rather than the same one. A couple examples are pictured on this slide. You will see exciting updates across all 4 strands of the program as you review the materials in your program kit this fall.
Are these changes exciting? Jamie Sarkanak writes, Strong Start's Castle game, according to the program explainer, was far too Eurocentric for Ontario schools. It was replaced with one about a playground, which is what we see here. In another game, which is a little bit later on in this video, the image of a queen to teach the letter Q was replaced with a quill. The diversity-minded people behind the switch evidently weren't aware that castles and queens aren't exclusive to Europe, which is true. Though even if they were, there's no harm in showing them to kids. Medieval fortresses inspire wonder. They're part of the nation's roots after all. Well, I agree with that entirely. These things exist. Whether or not the new DI ideologues want them to exist or not, they do exist. And this zero-sum attitude is very confusing. We can talk about these things and other things existing at the same time. They're not oppression, but not according to DEI. Of course, that's oppression.
Now, I would like to highlight a few other examples of the new designs for some of our game concepts and images. The Treasure Hunt board game in the Building Word strand had a distinct colonial theme. It needed to be updated in terms of its concept and images. This board game has now become Nature Walk. You can see how the reimagining of the game has a fresh look with a more familiar theme that is accessible to all. The vibrant fall color palette is particularly engaging for children experiencing life in Canada.
Okay, so Jamie Sarkanak writes on this slide, similarly, the treasure hunt game had a distinct colonial theme because it includes a depiction of a generic 17th century ocean crossing galleons in what was likely the Caribbean, as if elementary students enrolled in Ontario have the capacity to be traumatized by something that happened 400 years ago. A game about walking on nature trails has taken its place, ignoring, of course, that the park trail systems in North America are also a creation of colonialism. Logic is not their strong suit, though. Let's always remember that.
The Three Bears board game, used in both the letter strand and the sound strand, based on a fairy tale, portrayed narrow concept of family, stereotypical gender roles, and the attribution of human characteristics to animals. This board game has now become alphabet.
Well, hang on. How is it stereotypical gender norms? How does she know that they're not trans? How does she know that they're not trans? They could be trans. It could all be trans.
Soup. The concept of cooking
Or
or
non
making
binary.
soup is much more relevant and reflective of an activity children may engage in at home. The new artwork promotes an opportunity for discussion and vocabulary building as well.
Okay, so let's go read the article again. It says, most egregiously, the Three Bears game portrayed a narrow concept of family, stereotypical gender roles, and the attribution of human characteristics to animals. The classic mom dad child depiction of a family, which has propelled Western civilization for ages, is problematic. They were too heterosexual, and that they were animals made it even worse. On the frontier of oppressor oppressed thinking, it's considered wrong to show children images of anthropomorphic animals while also feeding them real life animals. Thus, this game was replaced with one about making alphabet soup. We're making a lot of assumptions about these families. I mean, like, look, what if somebody has an allergy to carrots, and we've got a photograph of some carrots here? Could that not be ableist? Assuming that everyone makes soup, this whole critical game can be done both ways. But it's just ideological nonsense.
The Great Bunch game from the Sound Strand is an example of a game with changes to several images resulting from the EDI review. You'll notice some of the pictures in the original game represent ideas that are Eurocentric, such as Queen and Elf. Others may be considered stereotypical, such as Igloo. Several others may be less familiar to children, such as an analog watch or a vase. As you can see in this revised version of the Great Bunch, the images have been refreshed. The pictures that have changed have been replaced with images that are more culturally sensitive.
Notice how the umbrella is a gay umbrella? Why does it have to be a gay umbrella? Not that, I mean, I don't have a problem with the rainbow gay umbrella, but why?
And familiar. Queen changed to quilt. Elf changed to eggs. Igloo changed to insect. And vase changed to vest.
Okay, I'm not going to finish. You can go watch the rest if you want. I'm not going to finish because they're just wrapping up here. But yeah, that umbrella thing, again, it's not really about homophobia or anything like that, but it's this like, again, this is why many people find it culty, because it's almost like demands symbolism, demands you conform to a certain way of looking at the world, and if you don't, you're a bad person. Even turning just an umbrella, which has nothing to do with anything, into a rainbow umbrella because gay people, uh, it is very culty. So Jamie Sarkanak brings up a really interesting point in her article. She says other iconoclast moves have come directly from schools and their boards. Equity informed weeding to cull books from school shelves, an ongoing phenomenon that shocked students in Ontario School last fall upon finding their libraries half empty, continues to be a recommended practice at the Canadian school libraries. We covered it on this show actually last fall, where the Peel School Board removed books before 2008 from their libraries, because the Canadian Libraries Association, they are full woke. Oh, here it is. At the Peel District School Board, a similar audit was carried out, resulting in one school losing all its books published prior to 2008. Later, this was attributed to an on-the-ground misrepresentation of board policy. A pretty big misrepresentation, if you ask me. The board denies that it was banned, that it has banned any books, and says it's replenishing its collection. Unfortunately, the board didn't make a list of the resources that it put to the trash because it wanted teachers and librarians to apply the weeding principle themselves to develop critical consciousness and train them to recognize harm, according to a district library administrator. Hints as to what the recommended titles might be can be gleaned from elsewhere. To Kill a Mockingbird and Of Men and Mice were removed from a Surrey, BC school recommended book list and were outright banned at Toronto's Catholic School Board. So we're replacing books for books that are conforming to an ideology. The reason I call this an ideology, because it is a politics. This is a political ideology, which is pretty radical and extreme in its views and very limiting in what it allows people to do, say, think, so on and so forth. And if you don't comply, then you're ousted. So you have to comply. This is a pretty authoritarian sort of ideology. We all know that by now, but it's worth repeating. Sarkanak says, aside from the books, it's all the other little things. Even Mother's Day is too traditional and non-inclusive for certain fragile school administrators. One Toronto school took down its students-created Mother's Day sign last year, which read, "Life does not come with a manual. It comes with a mom," because it does not reflect the inclusivity of our community. I mean, everyone is born of a mother, but never mind. And one province over, a Quebec school gender neutralized Mother's Day entirely. Celebrations of normal parenthood, three bears, or real life is slowly becoming off limits. You can go read the rest of the article. It's pretty much at the end here. But I wanted to share that with everyone because this stuff is really getting everywhere in education. And it's not helpful. This is not helpful. We need to recognize that DEI is a politics. It's a form of radical politics. It's rooted in a philosophy or a philosophical understanding of the world, which doesn't believe that there's any really objective truth to be known. It vilifies something it calls essentialism, which is that there is a truth to be known. It attacks something called Eurocentricity because that is so-called scientific essentialism is Eurocentric. So the idea that a truth can be discovered through fact-finding, a process known as the scientific method or the empirical method, is just one way of knowing, and there are many, and so we can't rely on one. And so that's why they're not interested in looking at student achievement. Like, is what they've done here actually improving student achievement? Is showing kids castles going to harm them and cause mental distress and trauma? They're not measuring what the impact is on the student achievement. Well, I doubt it. I don't know this for a fact, but I would doubt that they're actually going to check whether this makes any improvement on student achievement, because student achievement is not the goal. That is Eurocentrism too. So they're talking about getting rid of colonial ideas and Eurocentric ideas. So parents, you really need to be aware of how education has become a project of radical political indoctrination. This sounds bombastic, but it's simply the truth. Anyway, that's it for this segment. In July of 2023, Richard Bilkstzo, a longtime principal, took his own life after undergoing severe stress due to DEI training that he had to undergo. Now, the story at the time received a lot of attention and it sort of went quiet, but True North has recently put out an article updating us on some of what's been going on, and it's pretty interesting. So I'm going to read through the article and add a bit of my knowledge around some of the facts of this case. Hey, the article is "The review of Richard Bilkstzo's death is a complete and utter sham." The Education Ministry review announced more than a year ago into the circumstances leading to the death of beloved Toronto principal Richard Bilkstzo was a complete and utter sham, documents obtained by True North show. While those in the education community who mourned and commiserated with the much-loved principal were led to believe that the ministry would do something about the destructive impact of DEI ideology, ministry bureaucrats did nothing more than keep the charade going. Did nothing more than keep the charade of a review going for months and months. A 120-page FOI response indicates that ministry bureaucrats spent considerable time over a year covering their butts in response to media requests, sending many emails back and forth that accomplish nothing, accepting and subsequently ignoring input from interested parties, and kowtowing to the ministry's DEI bureaucrats from the Kathleen Wynne era. In the end, they produced nothing. The same goes for the alleged Toronto District School Board review of the circumstances leading to the tragedy. Bilkstzo took his life last July. Both his lawyers and his family said the 24-year principal was dealing with tremendous stress after being humiliated at 2 DEI training sessions by race expert Kike Ojo-Thompson, hired by retiring education director Colleen Russell-Rollins, who beat it out the door for vacation on September 18th, 6 weeks before official retirement date. And we know that it has a lot to do with the controversy around the Israel-Palestine protests that kids were taken to. His suicide came just weeks after he filed a $750,000 lawsuit against the TDSB, a lawsuit that has been on hold since his death. Preaching her anti-Black racism dogma, the DEI consultant singled out Bilkstzo repeatedly at 2 sessions in the spring of 2021 for daring to challenge her. She called him a white supremacist and berated Bilkstzo in front of 200 colleagues, claiming that he and his whiteness thought he could tell her what's going on for Black people. Even though a 2021 WSIB report called Ojo-Thompson's conduct abusive, egregious, and vexatious, the TDSB's anti-racism brass continues to ostracize and silence him. 2 weeks after his death, former Education Minister Stephen Lecce announced, to great fanfare, a review into options to reform professional DEI training to make it free of harassment and intimidation. Torontonian Michael Tepper, an FOI expert, put in his requests this past summer asking for all Education Ministry records relating to the investigation, inquiry, review of the death of Bilkstzo as ordered by Minister Lecce on or about July 25th of last year. So I met Michael Tepper, and he's the one who encouraged me to do FOIs. And I would encourage pretty much anyone who's curious about what's going on in their children's education to do the same, be very specific. They are worthwhile. Although in this case, I understand that there's been a lot of runaround, which we'll read about in the article. He said he provided the results to True North in the interest of full disclosure and transparency. It was shocking to review what came back. When Bilkstzo first passed away, and the ministry was asked for comments by several members of the media, it took 2 days and 5 bureaucrats to craft a 4-line response. One of those bureaucrats, the ministry's communication advisor, Ingrid Anderson, whose name is all over the FOI documents, did not respond to repeated True North requests for comment over nearly 2 weeks. Ditto for Edita McKay in Minister Jill Dunlop's office. On July 25th of last year, the FOI documents show that in response to those media inquiries, Anderson crafted a response for Lecce, offering his heartfelt condolences to Bilkstzo's family and friends. This tragic incident only underscores the need for greater accountability of school boards and the necessity to ensure professional training is free from harassment and intimidation, Lecce's statement said, which is great. If that were true, that would be what we want. We don't want this stuff to keep happening. I've tasked my officials to review what happened in this instance in the TDSB and to bring me options to strengthen accountability on school boards so this never happens again. Evidently, it was all smoke and mirrors. On page 46 of the FOI response, an issue note says that the ministry was exploring options to review anti-racism training in Ontario's publicly funded school system to ensure consistency across all boards. There are several meetings and emails back and forth about potential reviewers, always including the very bureaucrats who have an agenda to keep the education equity units alive. There are actually 2, the Education Equity and Governance Branch and the Education Equity and Board Governance Branch. For example, Rachel Osborne, Director of Education Equity, whose salary jumped from $137,000 to $171,000 in 5 years, was consulted repeatedly. Anushka Tikaram, Manager, Equity, Leadership and Accountability, the latter is a joke, and Amanda DeMilta, Senior Policy Advisor in the same secretariat, were also involved in the alleged review. Patrick Case, hired under Wynn's reign as Assistant Deputy Minister of the Equity Secretariat, had a huge hand in the review, non-review. Case, who made $200,000 in 2023, had close ties with Russell Rollins and weighed in on the report introducing the director's Vanity Project, a center for Black student achievement. Under Russell Rollins, that center absorbed millions and millions of dollars and offered Black students only select opportunities for mentoring and coaching. Now, I've come across Pat Case. Pat Case is interesting. So he led the Ministry of Education's Equity Secretariat, as far as I could tell. I don't think he is anymore, but he ran that. And Pat Case, this is very on the nose. Pat Case is a member of the Communist Party of Canada, which I'll put on the screen for you to go have a look at. So, yeah, a communist, a card-carrying communist, heads the Equity Department at the Ministry of Education. But that's not the only interesting thing about Pat Case. A colleague of mine, Dr. M, put out a report called Fulcrum and Pivot, which you can see in the description and go read for yourself. He analyzed the race relations and race-based policies at the TDSB since the 70s, and it's quite clearly led by individuals who are Marxists. It's not hidden. These are Marxist ideas and policies and that have developed in the TDSB since the 1970s. But why am I saying that? Because from what I can tell from this report, Pat Case was one of the first Black TDSB trustees, which is fine. But his brother, Dr. Fred Case, was part of the Black Liaison Committee, I think in the 1980s. And this committee is a new left radical Marxist Black Power sort of committee and group of activists that was outsourced by the TDSB. So Pat Case's brother was a new left radical Marxist and Black Power community advocate, outsourced by the TDSB to produce race relation policy and recommendations all the way up in the 80s. So this has been going on a really, really long time. Anyway, that was my little side note on Pat Case there. Case appears to have left the ministry in the spring of this year. But a 3-page August 2023 briefing note from Case, which may have likely swayed the higher ups from doing anything, said that they remain firm that professional anti-racism and anti-discrimination training will continue. Well, they've been working on this since the 70s to 80s. So yeah, they're very, very committed, and they've certainly made a lot of money by doing this, have great salaries and provide money to their communist and Marxist and equity promoting colleagues and friends. Since day one, we have taken decisive action to counter all forms of discrimination and hate in Ontario schools, the briefing note says. We will continue this important work to remove barriers that prevent too many children from reaching their full potential. The next point makes it abundantly clear that comprehensive changes to the education system, specifically DEI and critical race theory, were aimed at Black and other racialized students only. The briefing note also indicates that Bilkstzo sued the school board, alleging his reputation was systematically demolished during 2 anti-Black racism training sessions in 2021. It adds that the consultant in question, Ojo Thompson, said that the accusations were false and mischaracterized what occurred in those 2 training sessions. I heard the tapes of those sessions, as many others in the media did. I'm not sure there was any mischaracterization whatsoever. I also heard those tapes. There was definitely no mischaracterization. That is absolute race-based bullying that was happening. It was egregious, absolutely egregious. I mean, it must have been pretty difficult for Richard to feel like he had to take his own life down the line over it. If you've built your reputation and were a caring individual your entire life and then get berated by basically race hustlers. Anyway. The ministry's bureaucrats also appeared to work overtime to fend off repeated inquiries from the Ontario Ombudsman and the Office of the Auditor General, which is conducting a review of TDSB finances and should be reporting within a month. Yeah, the TDSB and other school boards keep complaining they have no money, and yet they pay all these DEI professionals so much money to basically make education or radicalize education. And they do not care about student achievement because merit is considered oppression. So yeah, I hope, if we want more money for school, we could literally just remove all of the equity secretariat stuff and all of the race hustling and DEI hustling. I'm not privy to the responses to the inquiry, as paperwork was removed from the FOI response. Meanwhile, thinking the minister meant what he said about the review, carefully crafted input came from the Toronto School Administrators Association, TDSB trustee Wei Dong Pei, the Ontario Principals Council and various administrators and educators urging Lecce to pursue the long overdue review of anti-racism training and the dangerous culture created by DEI ideology. So I want to talk about Wei Dong-Pei because I've met him in a few events, and I guess anti-woke events, and he did seem to me for the longest time to be somebody who understood that the overreach of DEI ideology was dangerous. He, as far as I know, was a friend and colleague of Richard Bilkstzo, and I went to one of his parent meetings a couple weeks ago after he put forward a motion. Basically, after the protests that had happened, the controversy over taking children to protest, he put a motion forward at the TDSB that the TDSB would fully comply with an investigation, ministry investigation. I went to one of his parent meetings at a school, and I was shocked at what I saw. At first, when I shook his hand and we had a little chat in the beginning, we talk about Richard and how he respected Richard, and he was terribly concerned about what had happened to him, which I've heard him say before. And then he proceeded in the rest of the meeting to push an anti-Asian racism policy. So I was a bit surprised by that because I heard him once say DEI stood for I didn't earn it, which I don't say, but a lot of people do say. So why is he pushing an anti-Asian racism policy? And I stood up to speak at this meeting, and I proposed that maybe we should be creating more anti-racism policies, that perhaps if we want to get rid of these issues around racism, that perhaps we need to stop doing anti-racism and start actually having similar values and goals and focus on merit and not create more racial segregation. Anyway, there were some people at this meeting that were really not happy about me saying this, that I got called a racist in that meeting. I was really taken aback by that, but I gave him the benefit of the doubt. And then he put forward another motion which got approved. And now the TDSB has some new anti-Asian racism training. So why is Wei Dong-Pei telling me that he was friends with Richard? He hates what happened to him. He understands that this anti-racism stuff is a problem, that it is dangerous, that he's signing here carefully crafted input that's saying we should get rid of this, whilst promoting more anti-racism policies. I don't give him the benefit of the doubt anymore. I'm highly suspicious of Wei Dong-Pei. Just watch this space with this guy. The article goes on to say, one correspondent whose name was blocked out for privacy reasons says he or she was a former TDSB employee also targeted and harassed by a principal during anti-Black racism training and on subsequent occasions. I finally had to quit because I could no longer take the constant harassment and bullying, the writer said. I know many teachers who were bullied and who are all too afraid to speak out for fear of repercussions. I can confirm I've had many teachers tell me the same thing about their situation. They're very afraid to speak up. There's a lot that's against them and their jobs and their professional reputations. Another teacher who was harassed for suspending 4 racialized students after they severely beat another student said his or her life had been destroyed. Then there's Ojo Thompson herself. Her 4-page letter to Lecce, dated August 2023, reinforces the need for her work, claiming there are persistent impacts of anti-Black racism in Ontario organizations and institutions. There's no acknowledgement of the pain and suffering she may have caused Bilkstzo. No, there's none. I remember when all this happened, she got bombarded with messages on social media and she did not like it. She was calling people racist. I mean, she's not having any of it. She is the definition of a race hustler. Instead, she called the exchanges with him a teachable moment about the importance of listening to the experience of Black people to understand how systemic racism is experienced by them. Teachable moment I found interesting because Doug Ford ran on a campaign to repeal the sex ed curriculum. Anyway, he was sued by the ETFO and the CCLA and some teachers saying that this was against the Human Rights Commission, and there were all these. Anyway, so he got sued by the unions and some ideologues over repealing the sex ed curriculum. And in there's a description of the leeway that educators have in the classroom. And the minister, one of the representatives of the Ministry of Education, Martin, what's his name? Martin Beckett, that's his name. he described that educators have what he calls professional leeway. They can use their professional judgment to teach anything that they want at any grade that they want, using any materials that they want, so long as they're tested at the age listed or at the grade listed in the curriculum. So in the curriculum means not that you teach a subject when it's in the curriculum, but that it has to be tested in that grade. But that's not what I wanted to mention. What I wanted to mention was he specifically describes that educators have this professional judgment leeway, and he calls it teachable moments, these magical teachable moments. And here we have Kike Ojo-Thompson talking about the teachable moments, that her bullying, that her race hustling is a teachable moment. I just thought that was kind of interesting. She also insisted his allegations in his lawsuit were false and that the WSIB ruling on her included damaging language and defamatory claims. She even alluded to the fact that a review and the WSIB claim could potentially renew the cycle of systemic racism. She's a crybaby. She's just a crybaby. She wants to keep her job and her high pay and her race hustling because she cannot accept the fact that her behavior and her ideology could actually lead people to very negative personal life consequences. Ojo-Thompson recently became a partner at Deloitte in its human capital practice. Russell Rollins has left the building and is accountable to no one. Ditto for Patrick Case. Stephen Lecce has moved to the Ministry of Energy. The Education Ministry's overpaid equity bureaucrats have succeeded in their efforts at self-preservation. Yeah, none of these people are going to be accountable to anything at this point. The media, which is all over the story a year ago, has moved on to other shiny objects, and it seems no one will ever be accountable for Bilkstzo's tragic death. And it all makes me so angry and tremendously sad. I agree with that sentiment. I think people do need to be held accountable for the impacts that they have. They keep talking about emotional harm, and these people are causing actual harm, actual physical loss of life. So I just wanted to share that article with everyone. Okay, so grade 9 students in Duncan, BC, that's District 79, if that's important to you, they were given comprehensive sex ed a presentation from a third-party organization about certain topics like masturbation porn, and it also included that minor attracted people are a sexual identity. Let's have a look at the post that I saw. Okay, let's check out this post. It says under this SOGI orientation and gender identity program that parents were posting on Facebook about some of the things that their children had learned in a lesson. This parent is particularly upset that their grade 9 child was taught in this lesson that about MAPS. We've heard that before, minor attracted people, and how the kids argued that it wasn't a sexual identity. And the parent was clearly very upset by this. Now, these parents are obviously not too happy about what their children were, or the kind of learning that their children were presented with in this lesson. And it's unclear to me from this post whether or not they were asked permission, but I suspect if they were deceived as to what the content of what the lesson would be. Further down this post, it says that the group who delivered the lesson specifically state, I'll just read this actually. It says that Carrie Isham, actually I've covered her on this channel before, we'll talk about her in a bit, from Power Up Education, which is the third-party sex ed, comprehensive sex ed organization, says that feedback from today's presentation on sexting, the kids really appreciated the presentation and so did the staff. From the parents' posts on Facebook, sounded like they didn't. I had a grade 9 child come and let me know that they really appreciated the conversation and information that you shared today. They came out to find you in the library. Making kids uncomfortable helps them remember and forces them to think about things differently. I cannot agree more that the uncomfortableness is an important part of change and understanding. I've come across this thinking before about how you have to create this dissonance, you have to create this discomfort so people can grow and change into it. But I don't know, some might actually just look at that as talking about children about inappropriate topics is not a good form of discomfort, whatever. So these children were uncomfortable. These parents did state that these children were uncomfortable. And Carrie from Power Up seems very happy about creating such discomfort among students. And she says, here we have her lesson package. And it clearly tells you that, what was she talking about? Consent, relationships, gender and sexual orientation. So this, I guess, would be where the maps came into. Sexting, pornography, talking about trafficking and condom demonstrations. Imagine, I don't know, it feels to me that the comprehensive sexuality education, there's some validity to some of the thinking, but maybe not all families want to do this. And it seems like it would be more appropriate to deliver this training to parents, and they can choose whether they want to deliver that to the kids, because these people can't be trusted at this point. I did check out her LinkedIn, and she does say that she does teach parents and grandparents and guardians and all that, but she doesn't mention that she teaches children directly. And it's not the first time that she is in the news. I spotted her last year as well. And Pierre Barnes has also covered her. He's got her on his timeline and on his website, I think. So she's not the first time that she's done things like this. And here's the article from last year that talks about how she put out a worksheet. Let's see if I can find the worksheet. Okay, here we go. So that article I just showed you quickly is about this worksheet from last year. This was, I think it was sent home with kids. And it's, look, some children might like to touch their own private parts and some children don't. So this is young children. What places in your home are private? Draw a picture of the private places where you can touch your penis or vulva if you want to. So the children have to then draw where they'd like to touch where they'd like to masturbate, basically. On the surface, I mean, I just don't trust this lady. I feel like that is really up to the parents to decide whether or not they want to do that with their, or they want their children to learn this material or not. But Carrie feels very differently. Let's look at her organization's website. This is Power Up Education, a tool for tough conversations. So that discomfort again. The Power Up premise, at Power Up, we believe sexual health education is not optional and is best delivered starting from 2 years old. Why teach early? We believe educating early is the key to eliminating sexual abuse. Educating early does not strip your children of their innocence, but sexual abuse will. Well, I would argue that what she's doing borders on sexual abuse. And I think this is the problem. Because it's delivered by a woman, we don't recognize it for what it is. When adults who are unrelated to a child, certainly without the express permission of their parents or their parents present, having inappropriate sexual conversations with children, that's sexual abuse. If a man was doing that, I don't think we'd be too happy about it. But when it's a woman, we sort of look the other way. Anyway, so that's her feeling. This is a comprehensive sexuality education argument that this prevents abuse, and so we have to do it. But we don't, I mean, do you really need to get a 5-year-old to draw where they want to masturbate? Is that appropriate? Did they ask permission to the parents? But never mind. She's passionate and committed to creating a world where sexual health education is as natural and habitual as brushing your teeth and combing your hair. I just don't trust this lady. I just don't trust her. I think that she may have good intentions for all I know. I'm not going to comment on her intentions, but the effect of this is clearly the students are saying that they're uncomfortable. The parents are unhappy about it. And she just plows forward. And she does have that attitude. So let me just play a video of her. It's 3 minutes long. It's a bit long. I hope you can watch the entire video. But it just shows the attitude that I have to do it. And if you don't like it, too bad.
So one of the things that I really want kindergarten kids to know is the private body part names. I'm going to pull up one of these books to show you how sometimes I have to change books to be current. So the private body parts are as follows. We've got the mouth. Nobody should ask you for a kiss. Like, you don't have to kiss someone if you don't want to. We don't put our mouth on anybody's body, and nobody should put their mouth on our body. That's just a rule. Just like we cross the street, we look both ways. We wear a helmet when we ride our bike. The breast for everybody. Everybody has breasts. And then I say to kids that most boys have a penis, but not all. And most girls have a vulva, but not all. So in this book, I changed it right in the book, because it is not true that all people who have a vulva identify as a girl. So on social media, the chance of it going viral is very high, particularly in this case when it was about body science, when it was about age 4-5 age children, and when private body part touching was also involved. So unfortunately, this this worksheet that went home that was then shared on social media went viral. And who I'm talking and went viral with was the people who are on the far alternative right. These are the same people that don't support LGBTQ. They don't support a trans man being pregnant. They don't support abortion. They support Trump. They don't support vaccinations and all of this kind of stuff. So Thursday night, building one on top of the other to prepare kids to be as safe as humanly possible. The worksheet in question went like this. Some children like to touch their own private parts and some don't. That's a fact. I don't care what nationality you're from. Little people touch their private parts in public, and part of our job as parents is to remind them not to do that. In my job as a sexual health educator, quite frequently in a kindergarten grade 1 classroom, I'll have a kid in the middle of my class touching their private parts. So I look up and say, hey friends, if someone's touching their private parts right now, remember we're in a public place. The hand comes out because they got the reminder from me. Then the worksheet says, what places in your home are private? That would be the bathroom or the bedroom. In some places, it's not their bedroom because they may share with 3 other people. So their only place that they could be alone maybe is in the bath or the shower or somewhere in the bathroom with the door closed. Then it says, draw a picture of the private places where you can touch your penis or vulva if you want to. Draw a picture of a bathroom or a bedroom. Then it says, all families have different rules about masturbation. Now, I understand masturbation could be a triggering word for some people, but guess what? That's the science word for touching your private body parts. Then it says, talk to a trusted adult about your family rules. Now, friends, from that page, I will tell you what the headline was. Homework assignment. Masturbation assignment for 4-year-olds. I don't even know what to say.
Thank you for watching that. You see, that's the video that I covered. It's on Pierre Barnes' website from last year. So she's been at this a little while. She's used to the pushback. She doesn't care. She's going to keep doing it. I hope that parents in BC demand evaluation of the third parties and full informed consent and to be able to pull their children out. Because like that website says, she doesn't believe that anyone should be able to opt out. Okay, so now for our last story. In its good news, a town called Barhead in Alberta has introduced a bylaw that bans flags that promote what they call political, social, or religious movements. And you know I love to see it. So that bylaw will also ban what it calls decorations, designs, or colors on crosswalks. So they'll just be painted white on all their public spaces. This comes after the town of Norwich in Ontario produced a similar bylaw banning non-government flags on municipal property in April last year. Obviously, the local activists in Norwich, Ontario went absolutely berserk, saying that this was transphobic, it was homophobic, this is terrible, we should never do it. But the bylaw stands, and that's continued on. So clearly, specific political, social, or religious movements are hardly inclusive. They do not include everyone, and they have no place in secular and a politically neutral society, which we should be living in. If we're going to be multicultural, if we're going to have all these different kinds of people with different belief, their own conscience of freedom of conscience, then we shouldn't be exclusively promoting certain political, religious, or what they call social movements. So I applaud that. I think this is a really fantastic move. And I hope that more towns across the country take on this tactic. It's not about banning LGBT. It's about, look, well, this one so happens to be a movement that is using this to its advantage to moralize on the public. But really, it's just about, look, people had different beliefs and we are a pluralistic society. And so let's not politicize it. Let's stay neutral. So that is absolutely wonderful. So what do you think of all this? Let me know in the comments if you have any thoughts on the stories that I presented with you today. And if you're so inclined, it really helps if we have likes, or if you're willing to subscribe as well. That would really help the algorithm and help other people see this content too, because there are not that many people in Canada covering the kind of material that we're covering, and we'd like more people to be able to access it. Yeah, if you enjoyed it, like and subscribe, and I will see you next week.